Well, this is so exciting. It is the first time that we are taking the Fit After 40 Women's Fitness and Health the Revolution podcast onto YouTube for the general public. I know, it's really crazy. I'm sure one day I'll get like a really fancy setup going, but for right now, welcome to my living room, everyone, and welcome to YouTube live screen. Super excited you're here today. So the way that these work, because we've got a couple backfilled, is that if you're watching on YouTube, you get some weird behind the scenes stuff because again, it's live. And if you're interested in seeing all the weird shenanigans, stay tuned because eventually there's going to be a way to do that. I'm not going to try to use words. Y'all, it's like 4 p.m., which is pretty much past my bedtime. So I feel like this introduction has been as perfect as I was hoping. So without further ado, what do you say we get this podcast poopity poppin'? Hello, and welcome to the Fit After 40 Women's Fitness and Health Revolution podcast. Kinsey here, and I am, as always, just plumb tickled to be talking with you today about today's topic. So, our topic today, drum roll please. You probably already know it because you read the title, but I want that drum roll. 5 ways to progressive overload at home to get stronger without needing to go to a gym. Now, there are 1.5 million reasons that we might not want to go to a gym or that we can't go to a gym. I have been an online personal trainer for many years. Sometimes it was because people didn't have time in their busy schedules. So it just made more sense to hop on a Zoom call with me in their lunch break or right before they hopped onto a Zoom call with their coworkers. Sometimes it's just a comfort thing where they don't feel comfortable or confident going into a gym. They don't know what to do. There's just plenty of reasons why people opt to work out at home. And that's a wonderful thing. But as always, the most important thing that we can do for our body as we age when it comes to fitness is building and maintaining muscle. And that becomes a little bit more of a challenge when we're looking at our home workouts because the benefit of having a gym is that we have access to all sorts of equipment and weights that we're probably, if we're most of us, not going to invest in for an at-home gym. So this is my attempt today to help ensure that you are continuing to progressive overload because remember, progressive overload is one of the most important principles of strength training and building muscles. It's a training principle that involves gradually increasing the stress on your muscles over time to continue stimulating growth and improve strength and endurance. So, if we are at home doing curls, let's just say with the same 10-pound weights over and over and over for weeks, for months, for years, eventually your body is no longer going to have to adapt in order to move that load. Traditionally, one of the most common ways to do that if we were in a gym would be to increase the weight by about 5 to 10%. So we'd take those 10-pound curls, we'd make them 12-pound curls for 10 to 12 sets. When that started feeling pretty easy and getting close or further and further away from fatigue, we could take it up to 15. So commonly, and I think when most people think about progressive overload, especially new to the fitness space, that's usually the thing that pops into the mind. And that is a great way to progressive overload. If you are working out at a gym, I love that. The other reason, however, that this podcast can be beneficial, even if you do work out at a gym, is that eventually, chances are you're going to kind of get to a ceiling for most of us who are just lifting for health, where we kind of tap out on the amount of weight that we can move, right? There are some moves that we can kind of keep building, like a hip thrust is something that I like to keep in my practice because I can get really strong at it. But say like an RDL, for me, I've kind of found my ceiling on where I am comfortable training it. I still get to my point of fatigue, but I use a lot of these things that we're going to talk about in order to continue to progressive overload without adding on weight. So they are applicable no matter where you're training, but especially for those of you who are training at home. I really want to give you these as tools to dial in to make sure that you're not just wasting your time. Listen, moving your body has many, many benefits on its own. But remember, when it comes to actually building and maintaining muscle, there's a very specific way that we need to train in order to stimulate the adaptation. So let's go ahead and dive into into the top 5 ways to progressive overload from home, or if you're at the gym and just sort of interested in trying something else. So, the first way might be kind of obvious if you sat down and gave it a think. It is to increase reps. So, if I'm traditionally doing 8 to 12 or like 10 to 12 reps of, I'm just squats, let's say, and I have a 25-pound weight and I'm doing 10 to 12 goblet squats. And after a while, I'm just I get to 12 reps and I'm like, I'm not feeling that 1 to 2 away from failure. Maybe 25 is the highest weight that I have in my house. So what can I do? I can increase the reps. So instead of going 10 to 12, now I'm going 12 to 15. If I get to 15 and I'm feeling that like 1 to 2 reps away from failure, huzzah. We might feel if we've been using the same weights for a long time that we're going to have to go exponentially higher. Now, there are studies that show that we can continue to train hypertrophy as high up into the like 30 rep ranges. So that's a lot of work. I've done it before, and most of the time it's not that it gets boring, it gets challenging, and my brain kind of wants to quit before my body does. But the point is, it is doable. However, we do want to keep in mind that we need to be within that close proximity to failure. So if you have 5, 6, 8 pound weights at home, there is just the truth in that most likely when we're looking at ways to like stimulate leg muscles, investing in weights will be something that you'll want to pursue down the line. But increasing reps is a great way to get started. Like I said, finding that close proximity to failure. And when you are like 1 or 2 reps away from being like, and I couldn't do a single rep, then you're in a good place. So that's the first place to start. Start taking yourself up in reps every single set. The next way to do it, and this gets pretty cheeky, is to increase your number of sets. So say you're doing 3 rounds of 10 to 12 goblet squats. Instead of taking it to 3 rounds of 12 to 15 goblet squats, maybe we do 4 rounds of 10 to 12 goblet squats. This one is a sneaky little baby. My workout buddy, Jamie, and I, shout out, we're doing Bulgarian split squats, and I just love Bulgarian split squats. Let me just put it this way. I don't want to have to hang around for 15 to 20 Bulgarian split squats. 10 to 12 is like, that's enough. So I added a set onto it. And boy, howdy, does that add up. When we're looking at like the NASM approach, National Academy of Sports Medicine, a lot of these, they have you taking up to as many as 6 sets, which to me in a gym capacity just doesn't always make sense for the timing. Because again, I'm in a phase of my life where an hour is about all I've got to dedicate. I've got clients, I've got other things to do, I've got a dog who wants to go outside. So an hour is what I like to commit, and doing 6 sets keeps you working for a while, especially if you're adding those longer rest breaks. However, if you're at home and if you've added your sets and then or you added your reps and then you added your set and you need to keep adding sets and you just have those 1 set of weights, that could be something to explore, going up to like 6. I've heard of like there was one celebrity trainer who talked about training like 10 sets of something. Again, I don't have numbers in front of me. I've never tried that style of training, so I can't just like fully throw it under the bus, but there is a point where I feel like there's a little bit of diminishing returns, and it's just like neuromuscular fatigue. Like after a while, I think we just sort of zone out and get out of our body. So there are certain points in training where it'd be advantageous to, again, explore adding an additional set of weights. But the good news is if you're implementing these one at a time, hopefully, or I mean, you won't have to add that new set of weights for a while. So it's not like you're dropping 50 to 70 bucks every 2 weeks. It's more like every 2 to 3 months. Okay, so increase reps, increase sets. This one is my favorite, and people do not believe me until they try it. And that is to slow the tempo. And honestly, this one does a whole lot. It's also very good for getting in touch with your body. I did an Instagram post on this day because I had a client this morning who shared with me that she was having trouble feeling her quads when she was squatting. She wasn't sure if she was feeling it in the right way. She wasn't really sure how to feel it. And this isn't super uncommon because remember, when we're getting started with moving our bodies, one of the main things we're doing in our first phase and then forever. But in our first phase, we're really developing that mind body connection. We're creating that pathway between our brain and a specific muscle to fire the way we want it to fire, which is why I always compare it rather to other skills like playing violin. You're training your body to do something very specific. So it's not uncommon for folks to feel like they don't know how to feel or they don't feel a specific part of their body, especially like when we're talking backline, when we're doing rows, because we sit in a world that's so anteriorly dominated where we're kind of rounding forward towards our computers. Right now, I'm probably doing that. I need to keep checking towards our phones, towards our cars. Those back muscles sit in lengthened position. And we not only are they in lengthened position, which makes them weaker, but we also sort of lose that mind muscle connection to the back body. So a part of it is really retraining how to even feel those muscles. So this tempo is also a really good way to do that as well. So two things that we can focus on when we're playing with tempo. The first one is slowing your eccentric phase or when the muscle is lengthening. So bicep curl, I feel like is just kind of an easy one to explain. When I curl the weight, I'm shortening it. And then when I release the weight, I'm lengthening that muscle. So that muscle, as I release my hand, is the eccentric phase. This is the most effective phase for progressive overload with tempo changes. You can gradually increase the time it takes you to lower the weight. So for example, you could take it from 2 seconds and then make it 3 seconds to 4 seconds over several weeks. So you could just play with tempo alone for progressive overload for a while. The other way to really make it cheeky with tempo is to add pauses. So we're incorporating a brief pause at the bottom or peak of a contraction during an exercise. This increases your time under tension and it makes the exercise a lot more difficult, even with the same weights and rep. And this is what she and I did. We increased her isometric hold. So that pause. We actually ended up having her go do a wall sit because if you sit on the wall and you're in the appropriate position, it becomes really hard to ignore that your quads exist. So that would be something like I had another client last week who was kind of unsure if they were feeling their split squat correctly. So when we got to the bottom of the split, we started adding just a 2-second pause. A, she could feel where she was supposed to be feeling it. And B, we ended up having to actually drop reps because it made them exercise a lot more intense. So that's a really, really clutch way. You can do that with anything, right? So you can slow down on your chest press, hold at the bottom, push up. Like I said, you can increase that time under tension over the weeks. You can add the pause at the base of the squat, play around with it, have fun. Just make sure you're doing it as always safely. Next up, so we have reps is 1, sets is 2, tempo is 3. This one is a little bit cheeky. It does really well when you incorporate it with the others, but sometimes, especially for lower body, we can break it down by doing unilateral work. So where we're focusing on one single leg exercise single leg exercises. Hello, brain. That allows for a greater focus and activation of the target muscles, enhancing hypertrophy and functional strength. And again, this is, like I said, the functional strength is another big piece why I just always encourage unilateral strength into any program because it really gives us a good indication of if both sides are firing correctly. So if we only did squats, there's no way of telling in our own bodies unless we're like very in tune. But even I've experienced this if one leg is firing more than the other, which is why it's really good to get them under single leg activation. So these could be things like lunges, split squats, a little more challenging. We're looking at things like single leg RDLs, Bulgarian splits, kind of like the hardest one of those, I'd say. Pistol squat, single leg bench squat is a nice start where you use like a bench or a chair and you practice your squat variation, but you pick up your foot. Step ups are great for this as well. So moving it to just one leg, say you just have that 25-pound weight. So if you're easily doing those 25-pound goblet squats, if you have, say, just a split squat and you have the 25-pound in one leg, now instead of using both legs in a squat position to get out of there, you're using that front leg to primarily move the load. Or like if you move it into a loaded pistol squat, or if you were to use a single leg RDL, that's another good example. If you had like two 25-pound weights and you were doing RDLs and not really feeling much, you could switch it to a single leg RDL. And even just that singular 25 at first might feel kind of spicy. So the fifth one is going to be increasing your number of workouts. Because again, at the end of the day, we're looking to increase the amount of working sets over time. Again, this is something where eventually we kind of find a cap just based on the fact that most of us have lives outside of the gym. So when we're starting out, we're looking like 5 to 10 sets of each body part. And as we become more conditioned, that 10 to 20 range is really what we're exploring. I did hear an interesting conversation recently where they were talking about actually finding gain benefits in after you've kind of worked to your max set of or amount of sets, deloading and coming back down and rebuilding, which again, I've never tried for myself, but when they were talking about it, the science kind of makes sense because again, you're challenging your body and then bringing it back up. This is kind of like a bonus. So let's go over those 5 real fast, right? 5 ways to increase or to rather 5 ways to hit progressive overload at home without having to go to a gym. 1 would be increase reps. 2 would be increase sets. 3 would be slow your tempo. 4 would be add in more unilateral work. And then 5 would be increase your number of workouts from like 2 workouts a week to 3 workouts a week, 3 workouts to 4 workouts. I do also want to say before we move on, make sure that you are not getting to the place where you don't have rest days, because then you're going to see diminishing returns because your body can't rest unless you have like this beautifully programmed program, design program. But even then, I think everybody should have at least 2 days of rest. That doesn't mean sit on your butt and chill unless you really want to. You can think of like active recovery, so walks, maybe yoga, etc. But when we're looking at strength training, those rest days are very important, especially as we get older. It becomes harder. One of the mechanisms that slows is our ability to recover from workouts. And not only does that set us up for injury, but it really means that we're not getting the most out of our workout. So we can see diminishing returns just because we're showing up to workouts super fatigued and not able to get our muscles into a place of fatigue. So sometimes pulling back on your number of workouts could actually be a way that you see muscular gain. Because if you're doing like 5 workouts a week right now and your muscles don't have time to recover, if your nervous system doesn't have time to recover, if you're not sleeping well, instead of showing up to 3 really strong rested workouts, we're getting 5 sort of mid workouts where maybe there's more of those like junk sets in there. So that's another thing to consider too. Whoa, bonus, every like 4 to 6 weeks, switch up the variation of the thing that you're doing. So remember when we're working strength pieces, we don't want to just bounce all over the place and do like a goblet squat here and a sumo squat this week and then a split squat this week. We want to stick with the same metric for several weeks and then build skill and also progressive overload that particular skill. So one thing you could do is say for 6 weeks, your main squat is a goblet squat. And then maybe the next 6 weeks, it's a sumo squat or a split squat variation. And then the next 6 weeks, it's a 1.5 squat where you get to the bottom and you do a slight pulse up and down and come back up. So every 4 to 6 weeks, you can kind of change up the stimulus once you've tapped out the ability to progressive overload on the variation that's currently in your programming. And then eventually, like we talked about, there is just a reality to the fact that there is going to be a time where it's going to be more advantageous to just buy the heavier weights, especially if we're rolling in with those 2, 4, 5, 6 pounds. There's just a limit to what they can do, especially when we're looking at leg dominant moves, because our legs are giant muscles, but even upper body, y'all. Like if we think about it, if we pick up a toddler, that kid weighs like 30 pounds. So if we're lifting 12 pounds and it's not really going to train us functionally, right? They're fine for your first month when you're training endurance, because so much of the endurance phase when we're looking at stabilization endurance is slowing down. So we're doing that 4-2-1 tempo of the eccentric for 4, the hold at the isometric for 2, and then back up. And we're doing higher rep ranges. But when we're really looking to build and maintain muscle, we simply need to move out of those weight ranges, even with all of these hacks that I just shared. Okay. Short and sweet today, as promised, because I feel like the last couple of episodes I've been like, this one's going to be short. And then 90 minutes later, I'm like, and that was year 5 of 30. So I hope this was helpful. If you know someone who is also working out at home and kind of feeling plateaued or uncertain about how to make their workouts go further, please, please, please share this episode with them. And in the meantime, if you got something out of this, like, subscribe, leave a review. If it's not a 5-star, I'll show you where else to go, but please don't hate on the metrics. This is a grassroots podcast, and all of your support goes a really long way. And my goal here is just to get it into more and more women's ears as a free resource on how to take care of their beautiful machines. All right, team, I hope you have an amazing week, and I will see you next week. In the meantime, take care of those incredible bodies. You're so stinking worth it. Aroo! Well, YouTube, too fun, right? Too fun. I forgot to say the best part of YouTube is that you guys get a joke at the end. Sit down because it's going to knock you over. They say solar energy is a thing of the future, but it's not going to happen overnight. Nailed it. That one I have to give a shout out to my fellow coach, Maggie. Her dad sends her dad jokes every Friday morning before she coaches, and they are amazing. That is maybe my favorite joke of all time. Okay, well, that's all I've got, folks. Thank you for checking out this first little video. Like, subscribe, drop in the comments questions you have about anything health and fitness, menopause, how to bulletproof our body and brains as we age, all the things, because chances are if you're asking these questions, other people are too. So thank you again for showing up here on the YouTube, and I will see you next week. Aroo! Laters.